You've risked too much already. One word to the wrong ear and you're finished.
Then I must choose my ears carefully.
You would go to the river tonight, in this storm.
The storm is the only cover I have. Tell them, each and every one, the crown will not be bargained, not while I draw breath.
A lead figurine. That's it. That's the evidence. Roughly 2 inches tall. Crudely made, found in someone else's house. Could have been a child's toy, could have been anything. But in 1469, it was enough to drag a duchess into court and accuse her of using dark magic to control a king. Her name was Jacquetta of Luxembourg. She was 60-something years old, a grandmother, widow of an English prince, mother to a queen, one of the most powerful women in England, and they were going to destroy her with a toy soldier made of lead. Welcome, get comfortable. This is going to take a while, and trust me, you'll want to stay for what comes next. If you're into these deep dives into history's darkest corners, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love seeing our community spread across time zones, all drawn to the same shadows. Tonight we're talking about the woman they tried to erase, the woman whose blood flows through every British monarch since 1485, the woman who was accused of witchcraft not once, but repeatedly, and who walked into court and dismantled every accusation with logic so sharp it could cut. They called her a witch, a seductress, a manipulator who used dark magic to control kings and crown her daughter. What she actually was, a survivor, a strategist, a woman who understood power better than most men ever would. And the secret they don't want you to know? Without Jacquetta of Luxembourg, the Tudor dynasty never happens. Elizabeth I never rules. England's entire history changes. But to understand how a European duchess became the target of England's most vicious political weapon, witchcraft accusations, we need to go back, way back, to before the accusations, before the scandal, before everything fell apart. We need to go back to 1416, to a little girl born into one of the most powerful families in Europe, a girl who had no idea that her bloodline would become both her greatest asset and her most dangerous liability. Because Jacquetta of Luxembourg wasn't just nobility, she was European nobility, the kind that made English nobles look like country farmers playing dress-up. And that difference, that's where the resentment started. That's where the hatred took root. That's where they began building the case that would almost destroy her. 1416, the Duchy of Luxembourg. Picture this, a stone castle rising from forested hills, not the drafty, damp English castles. This is continental sophistication. Tapestries woven in Bruges, showing scenes from classical mythology, floors covered in Turkish carpets that cost more than most English manors. Windows with actual glass, expensive, rare, letting in filtered light that makes the gold thread in the wall hangings shimmer. Servants move through corridors speaking French, German, Latin, Flemish. The kitchen prepares dishes with spices from the east, cinnamon, cloves, pepper that costs its weight in hers, silver. The wine cellars are stocked with vintages from Burgundy and the Rhineland. This is wealth, real wealth, the kind that's been accumulating for generations. Jacquetta is born into this world on a cold winter morning. The exact date is lost. Record keeping in 1416 isn't what it will become. But we know it's winter because later documents mention she was born under Capricorn. Her father is Pierre de Luxembourg, Count of Saint-Pol. His bloodline stretches back to Charlemagne if you follow it far enough, and medieval nobles absolutely follow it that far. Her mother is Marguerite de Beau, whose family controls territories in Provence and has connections to the papal court in Avignon. This isn't minor nobility. This isn't some backwater lordling hoping for a good match. This is power. Continental power. The kind that shapes popes and emperors. Jacquetta's childhood is privileged in ways English nobles can only imagine. She's educated, really educated. Not just needlework and household management, though she learns those too, but literature, philosophy, theology. She reads Ovid's Metamorphoses in Latin, discusses Augustine's City of God with her tutors, studies Aristotle's Politics, and understands the implications for governance and power. She speaks French natively, the language of the Luxembourg court, learns Latin for church and scholarship, picks up German from servants and visiting nobles, probably learns Italian because educated people in the 1500s consider it essential. By the time she's 12, Jacquetta can discuss theology with bishops, debate philosophy with scholars, and conduct diplomatic correspondence in 4 languages. She's being prepared for greatness, for a marriage that will expand her family's influence, for a life at the centre of European power. What she doesn't know is how that greatness will taste, how it will feel to be 17 years old and married to a man who could be her father. Because in 1433, when Jacquetta is 17, the marriage negotiations are concluded. She's going to marry John of Lancaster, Duke of Bedford. He's 43 years old, 26 years older than her. Old enough that his body is already failing from decades of warfare and stress and medieval living. But he's powerful, brother to the dead king, regent of France, essentially ruling 2 kingdoms while a baby sits on England's throne. The marriage happens at Therouanne in April of 1433. The ceremony is elaborate, has to be, with this level of nobility. Bishops in attendance, nobles from across France and England, expensive gifts exchanged, contracts signed and witnessed. And then the wedding night. Imagine being Jacquetta, 17 years old, educated, sophisticated, raised in Luxembourg's refined court. The bedchamber smells of lavender and roses. They've scattered petals and herbs to make it pleasant. But underneath, there's the smell of a man who's been fighting wars for 20 years. Sweat that never quite washes out of skin, breath that's sour from rotting teeth and digestive problems. John of Lancaster is kind. By all accounts, he's gentle with her. Not cruel, not violent, just old. His hands shake slightly from years of gripping sword hilts and reins. His joints crack when he moves. His skin is weathered from campaigning in France, lined and spotted with age. He's been married before. His first wife died childless. He knows what he's doing, knows how to be careful with a young bride who's never done this before. But it's still an old man climbing into bed with a teenager. She lies there in the darkness, candles blown out for privacy, and feels his weight, smells his breath, feels his hands, rough from years of warfare, touching skin that's never been touched by anyone. This is her duty. This is what noble girls do. You marry for alliance. You produce heirs. You don't complain. Jacquetta doesn't complain. She's Duchess of Bedford now, one of the most important women in England and France. She has estates, servants, wealth, influence. The price is sharing a bed with a man who's dying. Because John of Lancaster is dying. Slowly. His stomach has been troubling him for years, probably ulcers from stress and bad food and constant worry. He can't eat rich foods anymore without pain. His digestion is failing. He's been ruling France as regent while fighting a war he can't win. The French have Joan of Arc now, a peasant girl who claims God speaks to her and who's winning battles that should be impossible. John is losing. France is slipping away. The English territories he's spent decades securing are falling to French forces, inspired by a girl in armour who hears voices. The stress is killing him, literally, and Jacquetta watches it happen. For 2 years, she watches her husband deteriorate. She manages his household, entertains visiting nobles, conducts correspondence, presents herself as the perfect Duchess. At night, she sleeps next to a man who groans in pain, whose breath smells worse every month, whose body is slowly shutting down. She's 19 years old when John of Lancaster dies in September of 1435. His stomach finally gives out, maybe peritonitis from a perforated ulcer, maybe just complete system failure from years of abuse. He dies at Rouen, the city where Joan of Arc was burned 4 years earlier. Ironic, considering Joan's victories contributed to the stress that killed him. They bury him with full honours. Duke of Bedford, brother to King Henry V, regent of France, one of the most powerful men in Europe, and Jacquetta is free. 19 years old, wealthy widow. childless. 2 years of marriage produced no pregnancy, which people whisper about but can't explain. She should remarry immediately. Another political alliance, another powerful noble who needs a young wife. That's the script. That's what everyone expects. Watch what Jacquetta does instead. His name is Richard Woodville. He's a knight in John of Lancaster's household. He'd served the Duke for years, fought in France, handled diplomatic missions, did the kind of work that keeps military campaigns running. He's probably in his mid-20s, maybe 30. The records don't give his exact age, but he's young. Significantly younger than John of Lancaster. Closer to Jacquetta's age than to her dead husband's. And he's handsome. Every account that mentions him notes this. Tall, well-built from years of fighting. Dark hair, the kind of looks that make court ladies notice. But compared to Jacquetta's status, he's nobody. Richard's father is also Richard Woodville, minor nobility serving the Lancasters. They have a small estate, some lands, enough to be gentlemen but nothing approaching ducal wealth. Richard has no title beyond Sir, no vast estates, no powerful family connections beyond service to the Lancasters. He's exactly the kind of man a widowed Duchess does not marry. Jacquetta is supposed to marry a duke, an earl at minimum, someone with lands and titles and the kind of wealth that matches her Luxembourg heritage. The offers are already coming in. Nobles from across Europe presenting themselves as candidates. Men with armies and castles and political influence. And Jacquetta chooses Richard. We don't know exactly when it happens. The timeline gets fuzzy here, deliberately obscured, because what they did was scandalous. Sometime between John's death in 1435 and 1437, Jacquetta and Richard fall in love, or lust, or something powerful enough to make her throw away political calculations and just reach for what she wants. They marry in secret, probably at one of Jacquetta's estates. Definitely without asking permission from anyone in authority. Because here's the thing about medieval marriage, especially for nobility, especially for someone like Jacquetta. You don't just marry whoever you want. Marriage is political, economic, strategic. High-ranking widows are valuable commodities. They bring wealth, connections, legitimacy. Their remarriage affects power structures across Europe. Jacquetta is supposed to ask permission from the English crown, get approval, negotiate terms, make sure her marriage benefits the kingdom. She skips all of it, just marries Richard, probably in a small ceremony with minimal witnesses, a priest who's willing to perform the rite, maybe a few servants sworn to secrecy, and then they consummate it, multiple times, deliberately, because once the marriage is consummated, it's almost impossible to annul. The physical evidence is there. The marriage is legal, binding, done. By the time the English court finds out, Jacquetta is pregnant. The scandal is massive, international, shocking. Because this isn't just unusual. This is a complete violation of how noble marriage works. A duchess, a Luxembourg duchess connected to half the royal families of Europe, has married a mere knight. A man with no significant title, no great wealth, no political importance. For what? For love? For physical attraction? For reasons that have nothing to do with political advantage. It's incomprehensible. The English crown is furious. King Henry VI is young and not particularly effective at ruling. His council makes most decisions, and the council is livid. Jacquetta should have consulted them, should have allowed them to negotiate a politically advantageous match, should have used her remarriage to strengthen England's position in France or create useful alliances. Instead, she married for herself, for her own desires, for reasons that benefit no one except the two people involved. The punishment is financial. She's fined £1,000, an enormous sum, enough to seriously damage most fortunes. Jacquetta pays it, doesn't fight it, doesn't try to negotiate it down, just pays the fine and moves on with her life. Because she got what she wanted, Richard, and she's willing to accept the consequences. Think about what this means, what it says about her. Jacquetta was raised in luxury. She knows exactly how much £1,000 is. She understands she's throwing away political opportunities, alienating powerful people, damaging her reputation. And she does it anyway, because for once in her life she's choosing for herself, not for family alliances, not for political advantage, not for duty or obligation, for herself. It's remarkable, genuinely remarkable for a woman in the 1400s. And of course people think it's witchcraft. How else do you explain it? A sophisticated duchess marrying a nobody? A woman with everything throwing it away for a man with nothing? Unless she's under some kind of spell, unless he's bewitched her, unless there's magic involved. The whispers start immediately. How did Richard Woodville seduce a duchess? What hold does he have over her? She must be cursed, enchanted, under some kind of spell. Or maybe, and this version gains traction in certain circles, she's the witch. She used magic to make herself irresistible to him, to trap him in some unnatural bond. Neither version makes logical sense. If Jacquetta wanted to bewitch someone, why choose a man with no power? If Richard had magical abilities, why waste them on one duchess when he could bewitch his way to a throne? But logic isn't the point. The accusation is the point. Because once you call a woman a witch, the label sticks. It grows. It spreads. And 30 years later, when Jacquetta's enemies need a weapon to destroy her, this whisper will still be there, waiting. But for now, in 1437, Jacquetta and Richard are just newlyweds, living quietly, raising children. They have 14 children total. 14. Though some die young because this is the 1400s, and infant mortality is brutal. Their first child is a daughter, Elizabeth, born in 1437 or 1438. Jacquetta holds her newborn daughter and has no idea that this baby will become Queen of England, will marry a king, will crown Jacquetta as grandmother to royalty. All she knows is she has a healthy daughter, a husband she chose, a life that's hers. For 20 years they live in relative obscurity. Richard serves in various military campaigns, gets knighted for service, receives a few minor titles and lands, but they're not powerful. Not by the standards Jacquetta grew up with. They're comfortable, respectable, but not influential. Their children grow up in a manor house that's nice but not palatial, with servants but not dozens of them, with education but not the extensive tutoring Jacquetta received. Elizabeth, the eldest daughter, is taught to read and write, learns French and some Latin, understands household management, is prepared to make a good marriage to a minor noble. No one expects more. No one imagines that this girl, growing up in rural England, will end up wearing a crown. But Jacquetta is teaching her daughter things, important things, things that have nothing to do with needlework. She's teaching her how to read people, how to listen for what men don't say, how to appear humble while calculating 3 moves ahead, how to survive in a world designed to destroy women who have ideas of their own. She's preparing Elizabeth for something, though she might not know what yet, just preparing her, making sure her daughter has the tools to survive whatever comes. Because Jacquetta knows from experience that circumstances can change overnight, that comfort can evaporate, that you need skills beyond needlework and prayer to navigate crisis. She doesn't know that the crisis is coming soon, that in 1461 everything will change, that her daughter will meet a king, and that the quiet obscurity the Woodvilles have enjoyed for 20 years is about to explode into the most scandalous marriage in English history. But before we get there, we need to understand what England looks like in the 1460s, because the Wars of the Roses are tearing the country apart. And in that chaos, in that violence, opportunities emerge for people smart enough to seize them. 1455 to 1461, England is eating itself alive. The Wars of the Roses, Lancaster versus York, Red Rose versus White Rose, 2 branches of the same family fighting for the throne. It's not about ideology, not about religion or philosophy or competing visions for England's future. It's about power, pure, simple, violent power. Who gets to be king? Whose line gets to rule? Whose children inherit the throne? The fighting is brutal, not clean battlefield victories with clear winners and losers, but ambushes, betrayals, shifting alliances, executions, attainders stripping families of their lands and titles. You could go to bed a wealthy noble and wake up landless. Could be dining with allies and find out they've switched sides overnight. Could be fighting for Lancaster on Monday and begging York for mercy by Friday. Trust is a commodity no one can afford, and through all of this chaos, the Woodvilles are trying to survive. Richard Woodville fights for Lancaster, for Henry VI. It's not about loyalty so much as calculation. The Lancasters gave him opportunities, so he fights for them. His daughter Elizabeth has married. John Grey, Lord Ferrers of Groby, a Lancastrian supporter. They have 2 sons, Thomas and Richard Grey. It's a good match. Solid. Elizabeth is settled, has children, should be secure. And then in 1461, everything collapses. The Battle of Towton, February 29th, 1461. The bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. It's winter, snowing. The armies meet in a field in Yorkshire and just butcher each other. For hours. Tens of thousands of men hacking at each other with swords and axes and bills. Slipping in mud that's half snow, half blood. Screaming, dying. Bodies piling up so high that soldiers have to climb over corpses to reach the enemy. By the end, estimates say 28,000 men are dead. 28,000. Out of armies totaling maybe 60,000. Nearly half of everyone who fought at Towton dies there. The snow falls on bodies that are still warm. Blood steams in the cold air. Men with severed limbs try to crawl away and freeze to death in the drifts. It's hell. Medieval hell. The kind of slaughter that traumatizes survivors for life. And the Lancastrians lose. Completely. Definitively. Henry VI flees to Scotland. His queen, Margaret of Anjou, escapes with their son. The Lancastrian cause collapses. Edward of York becomes King Edward IV. He's 18 years old, 6'4", a giant for the 1400s. Handsome, charismatic, a warrior who fought personally at Towton and emerged victorious. The Yorkists have won, which means everyone who fought for Lancaster is now a traitor, including John Grey, Elizabeth Woodville's husband. John Grey dies sometime in 1461. We don't know exactly how. Maybe at the Second Battle of St. Albans, maybe at Towton, maybe in a skirmish afterward. What we know is that he dies fighting for Lancaster, for the losing side, and Elizabeth is suddenly a widow. 24 years old, 2 young sons, no income. Because the lands that came with John Grey, those are forfeit, are tainted, stripped away because he was a traitor who fought against the new king. Elizabeth goes from comfortable to desperate overnight. Her son's inheritance, gone. Taken by Edward IV and given to Yorkist supporters as rewards for loyalty. She has nothing. No estates, no income. No way to support her children. Just her title, Lady Grey, and her mother's advice. Jacquetta has seen this before, has watched everything collapse and had to rebuild. She knows how power works, how to navigate court politics, how to survive when you have nothing but intelligence. She tells Elizabeth what to do. Go to the king, ask for your sons' lands back. Don't beg, don't grovel, just ask directly, confidently. Make him see you as a person, not a problem to dismiss. So, Elizabeth does. In 1464, she positions herself near Grafton Regis, the Woodville estate, when she knows Edward will be passing through. She stands under an oak tree. Legend says it's this specific oak that you can still see today, though that's probably romantic nonsense added later. She has her 2 sons with her. Thomas is about 7. Richard is maybe 5, both old enough to understand that something is wrong, that their inheritance is gone, that their mother is trying to fix it. Edward sees her. He's riding with his retinue, probably hunting, probably just passing through on his way to somewhere more important. And there's this beautiful woman standing under a tree with 2 children, looking directly at him, not throwing herself at his feet, not weeping dramatically, just standing there, waiting. Edward stops. He's intrigued. Who is this? What does she want? Elizabeth explains. Calmly, clearly. Her husband died fighting for Lancaster. She understands that makes him a traitor. She understands the lands are forfeit. But her sons, their children, they didn't choose sides. They weren't at Towton or St. Albans. They're just boys who need an inheritance. Could the king, in his mercy, restore their lands? It's a good pitch, well delivered. She's not asking for herself, asking for her children, appealing to his sense of justice. Edward is impressed. This woman is composed, intelligent, beautiful in a way that's not just physical. There's sharpness here, wit. He makes her an offer, the kind of offer young kings make to beautiful widows. Become my mistress, share my bed, and I'll restore your son's lands. Elizabeth refuses, politely, respectfully, but firmly, to you. Edward is stunned. Women don't refuse the king, especially women who need something from him, especially when he's young and handsome, and offering exactly what she asked for. But Elizabeth won't do it. She'll be someone's wife, but she won't be anyone's mistress, not even a king's. She has her pride, her dignity, and Jacquetta's voice in her head, reminding her that compromise is a slippery slope. Once you become a mistress, you have no power. You're dependent on the king's continued interest. The moment he's bored, you're discarded. A wife has legal rights, protection, status. A mistress has nothing. So Elizabeth says no, and she starts to leave. Edward watches her walk away, sons trailing behind her. Dignified, unbowed, and he's fascinated. He's used to women trying to seduce him, throwing themselves at the king, using their beauty to gain access to power. Elizabeth is doing the opposite, refusing him, walking away. She's playing a different game, whether consciously or just instinctively. She's making herself valuable through scarcity. You can't have me, she's saying. I'm not available. And Edward, young and impulsive, and not used to being told no, decides he has to have her, not as a mistress, as a wife. May Day, 1464, Grafton Regis. The exact date isn't certain. Records from this period are spotty. But it's sometime in late April or early May, spring. The countryside is green, apple blossoms are blooming, birds are nesting, and Edward of York, King of England, is about to do the most reckless thing any English king has done in recent memory. He's going to marry in secret. No announcements, no negotiations, no consultations with his council or parliament or advisors, just a quiet ceremony in a small chapel attached to Jacquetta's manor house. Imagine the scene. It's early morning, the sun is barely up, mist is still clinging to the ground. The chapel is tiny, stone walls, a few wooden benches, an altar with candles burning, simple, private, about as far from a royal wedding as you can get. Edward is there. He rode from wherever he was staying the night before, probably told his retinue he was going hunting, slipped away at dawn. He's wearing travelling clothes, nothing royal, just a well-dressed nobleman's outfit, no crown, no regalia, no indication this is the King of England. Elizabeth is there, wearing probably her best dress, but not a wedding gown, nothing elaborate, just a nice gown that makes her look beautiful without being ostentatious. Jacquetta is there, watching her daughter marry a king, knowing exactly how scandalous this is, knowing the consequences will be massive, but also knowing this is the gamble, the opportunity, the moment when everything changes for the Woodvilles. Richard Woodville might be there, or maybe not. Maybe they kept it even more secret. Minimal witnesses, just enough to make it legal. A priest performs the ceremony. He knows what he's doing is controversial, but it's not illegal. The king is free to marry. Elizabeth is a widow, free to remarry. The marriage is valid. They exchange vows. Edward takes Elizabeth's hand, promises to love and honour her, to make her his wife and queen. Elizabeth promises to love and obey, to be his wife and consort. They're married. And then, because this is crucial, because this is what makes it irreversible, they consummate the marriage, right there. Probably not in the chapel itself, that would be sacrilege, but somewhere private. Jacquetta's manor house, a bedchamber prepared for this moment. Edward and Elizabeth consummate their marriage, multiple times, over hours, because once it's consummated, it can't be annulled on grounds of non-consummation. The physical evidence is there. And when Edward finally rides back to wherever he's supposed to be, he's married to Elizabeth Woodville, Queen of England, and nobody knows. For months they keep it secret. Edward continues as if nothing has changed. Conducts state business, meets with advisors, presents himself as the unmarried king. Meanwhile, he's sneaking away to visit his wife, having to maintain this elaborate deception, this double life. It's absurd, unsustainable, and completely characteristic of Edward IV, who spent his entire reign doing reckless, impulsive things that somehow worked out. But he can't keep it secret forever, because the Earl of Warwick, Richard Neville, the man who helped put Edward on the throne, is in France negotiating a marriage treaty. Warwick is arranging for Edward to marry a French princess. Bona of Savoy, it's perfect politically, creates an alliance with France, secures England's position, strengthens Edward's rule. Warwick is in the middle of these negotiations, promising the French that Edward will marry Bona, shaking hands, signing preliminary agreements. And in September 1464, Edward finally tells his council, "Oh, by the way, I'm already married to Elizabeth Woodville. We married in May. Sorry, I forgot to mention it." The council loses their collective mind. Warwick is in France making promises Edward can't keep. The French are going to be insulted, humiliated. The alliance is dead. And worse, much worse, Edward has married a Lancastrian widow. Elizabeth's first husband fought against Edward, against York, died as a traitor to the Yorkist cause. And now she's queen. It's a political disaster, an insult to everyone who fought for York, a betrayal of Warwick's trust. But it's done. Legal, consummated, irreversible. Edward is king. He can marry whoever he wants, and he chose Elizabeth. Warwick returns from France looking like an idiot. The French are furious. The English nobility is horrified. But Elizabeth is queen, and Jacquetta is suddenly the most powerful woman in England who isn't wearing a crown. The Queen Mother's mother, the matriarch of the new royal family, and she's going to use every bit of that power to elevate her entire family. Watch what happens next. Watch how the Woodvilles take over England, and watch how the resentment builds until it explodes into accusations of witchcraft. Because the old nobility isn't going to accept this quietly. They're going to fight back. And in medieval England, when you want to destroy a powerful woman, you have one perfect weapon. You call her a witch. Elizabeth isn't crowned immediately. There's too much controversy, too much resistance. But by May 1465, the coronation finally happens. Westminster Abbey. Full ceremony. Elizabeth Woodville officially becomes Queen of England. Jacquetta watches her daughter crowned, watches the Archbishop place the crown on Elizabeth's head. Watches nobles kneel before the woman they thought was nobody special just a year ago. It's vindication, triumph. Everything Jacquetta sacrificed when she married Richard Woodville, the political connections, the Luxembourg prestige, the £1,000 fine, is suddenly worth it. Because her daughter is queen. And now the real work begins. Elizabeth understands something crucial, something her mother taught her. Power doesn't come from a title alone. It comes from connections, from placing your people in positions of influence. So she starts marrying off her siblings, systematically, strategically. Her sister, Margaret first, married to Thomas Fitzgerald, Earl of Arundel. He's one of the wealthiest nobles in England, vast estates, political influence. And now he's married to the Queen's sister, then Catherine. The Duke of Buckingham needs a wife for his son. The son is 11 years old, Catherine is 20. The age gap is grotesque by modern standards. But this is the 1400s. Noble marriages regularly involve children. Catherine marries the boy, becomes Duchess of Buckingham when he comes of age. The Woodvilles now have access to Buckingham, wealth and influence. Anne Woodville marries Thomas, heir to the Duke of Exeter. Another major noble house, another alliance secured. Joan Woodville marries Anthony Grey, heir to the Earl of Kent. Mary Woodville marries William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke. One by one, sister after sister, each marriage carefully calculated, each one placing a Woodville woman in a powerful noble household. But the most scandalous match is John Woodville. Elizabeth's brother John is about 20 years old, good-looking, charming, no particular accomplishments beyond being the Queen's brother. Elizabeth arranges for him to marry Catherine Neville, Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. Catherine is somewhere between 65 and 80 years old. The records aren't clear, but she's elderly, old enough to be John's grandmother. The marriage is a farce. Everyone knows it. Catherine has no children left to produce. The marriage is purely about money and access. Catherine controls the vast Norfolk estates. When she dies, John, or his heirs, will inherit or at least have claims to portions of the wealth. The nobility mocks him, calls him a fortune hunter, a boy marrying a crone for her money. John doesn't care, neither does Elizabeth, because now the Woodvilles have their fingers in the Norfolk fortune. It's a systematic takeover. The old nobility watches in horror as these upstarts, these Woodvilles, whose grandfather was a merchant, marry into every powerful family in England. They call it the Woodville invasion, and they hate it. Because here's the thing, medieval nobility is built on bloodlines, on centuries of inherited status, on the belief that some families are simply better than others because of ancient heritage. The Woodvilles don't have that. Richard Woodville's grandfather made money through trade, through buying and selling goods, through work. To the established aristocracy, this is horrifying. These aren't real nobles. They're jumped-up merchants pretending to be aristocrats. And now they're everywhere, in every great house, connected to every powerful family, marrying into bloodlines that go back centuries. It's an insult, a violation of the natural order. And it gets worse, because Elizabeth doesn't just place her siblings, she places her relatives in government too. Her father, Richard Woodville, is made Earl Rivers, then Treasurer of England, one of the highest offices in the kingdom. Her brother Anthony Woodville becomes one of Edward's closest advisors. He's educated, genuinely intelligent, well-read, cultured. He speaks multiple languages, writes poetry, participates in tournaments. He's exactly the kind of Renaissance man the old guard hates because he proves merit can matter more than bloodline. Elizabeth's son from her first marriage, Thomas Grey, is made Marquess of Dorset, given lands and titles and responsibilities. The Woodvilles are in the treasury, in the council, in the king's inner circle, in the military. In the church, relatives get appointed to bishoprics and other clerical positions. They're everywhere, and they control access to the king. If you want favour from Edward, go through the Woodvilles. If you want land, talk to the Queen. If you want a pardon or a grant or a position, the Woodvilles can make it happen. Elizabeth sits in on council meetings. Not officially. Women aren't supposed to participate in government, but she's there, in the room. Edward discusses things with her, values her opinion. She reads state papers, knows what's happening in Parliament, makes suggestions that Edward frequently accepts. She's not just queen consort, a decorative figurehead who bears children and looks pretty. She's a political operator, and through it all, Jacquetta is there, in the background, advising her daughter, supporting the family, using her decades of experience, navigating continental politics to guide the Woodvilles' strategy. She's the matriarch, the architect, the one who taught Elizabeth how to play this game, and the Earl of Warwick sees it all, watches it happen, and seethes. Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, the kingmaker, the man who put Edward on the throne. He expects gratitude, expects to be the power behind the throne, the trusted advisor who actually runs things, while the young king signs papers. Instead, he's being pushed out, systematically, methodically. Every position he wants for his allies goes to a Woodville. Every suggestion he makes is countered by the Queen. Every time he gains ground, Elizabeth outmaneuvers him. He's being erased, and he knows exactly who to blame. Not just Elizabeth. Elizabeth is young, new to power. She's learning. Jacquetta, she's the one pulling strings, teaching her daughter, shaping strategy. Jacquetta is the real threat, the experienced operator who knows how continental politics work, who understands power in ways these provincial English nobles never will. She's dangerous, and Warwick needs to destroy her. So when he finally rebels in 1469, when he raises an army and captures Edward and tries to force him to break with the Woodvilles. He needs a narrative. He needs to explain why a good, reasonable king would throw away a French alliance for a widow, why Edward would risk civil war for the Woodvilles. Simple answer: witchcraft. Elizabeth bewitched Edward, used sorcery to trap him. And who taught her? Who gave her the knowledge and tools? Jacquetta, obviously. Jacquetta, who married Richard Woodville 30 years ago under suspicious circumstances, who chose a nobody over powerful suitors. She bewitched Richard first. That's the story, that's the narrative. Used dark magic to make him marry her. Learned forbidden arts during her time in France. Practiced sorcery in secret for decades. And then taught her daughter the same tricks. Mother and daughter, both witches, both using magic to seduce men and steal power. It's absurd, ridiculous, falls apart under any scrutiny. But it doesn't need to be true, it just needs to be useful. And in 1469, Thomas Wake, one of Warwick's followers, provides the evidence. A lead figurine, found in his house, claimed to be proof of Jacquetta's witchcraft. It's nothing, a toy, a random object. But in 1469, it's enough to drag a duchess into court on charges that carry the death penalty. Jacquetta is 60-something years old, a grandmother, a woman who's survived scandal, war, political upheaval, and now she's facing execution for witchcraft, based on a piece of lead someone found in a stranger's house. This is where most women would panic, would beg for mercy, would hope their connections could save them. Jacquetta walks into that courtroom and decides to win. 1469, summer. The court is convened somewhere in London. The exact location isn't recorded, but it's official. Lords and bishops assembled, a formal hearing. The room smells like sweat and wool, and the kind of nervous energy that comes from watching powerful people fall. Bodies packed into a space without enough ventilation. Windows open, but the summer heat making everything worse. Jacquetta stands accused, formally, officially. The charge: witchcraft, using sorcery and dark magic to bewitch King Edward IV, forcing him, through supernatural means, to marry her daughter. The evidence is presented. Thomas Wake steps forward, holding the lead figurine. This, he says, holding it up for everyone to see, belongs to the Duchess of Bedford. I found it in my house, hidden, secret. It's a poppet, a magical tool used to control men's minds. The crowd murmurs. Nobles lean forward. This is what they came to see. The figurine is crude, maybe 2 inches tall. Could be a toy soldier, could be anything. But Wake insists it's magical. She made this, he continues, used it in rituals, spoke incantations over it, bound the king's will to her daughter's desires. It's theatre, performance. Wake is playing to the crowd, building drama. Jacquetta just stands there, 60-something years old, dressed simply, no elaborate gowns, no jewellery beyond what's appropriate, just a woman facing her accusers. She's been through worse. She married for love and paid the price. She watched her husband die slowly. She navigated continental politics. She survived wars. This is just another performance, another game where the stakes are life or death. She speaks. Her voice is calm, clear, no trembling, no fear. My lords, she begins, I'm accused of possessing this object. She gestures toward the figurine. I'm told it was found in Thomas Wake's house, not in my possession, not in my home. In his house. She lets that sink in, makes eye contact with the judges. I've never seen this object before. I don't know who made it. I don't know its purpose. The only connection between me and this thing is Thomas Wake's word, his claim that it belongs to me. She pauses, looks at Wake. Master Wake serves the Earl of Warwick, the same Earl who is currently in rebellion against the king, the same Earl who stands to gain if I'm convicted, if my family is destroyed. The room goes quiet, because she's right. Everyone knows Warwick is behind this. Everyone knows Wake is his tool. But stating it openly, calling out the political motivation, that takes courage. I'm told this figurine proves I practice witchcraft, Jacquetta continues. But how? Where are the witnesses who saw me make it? Where are the people who observe me performing rituals? Silence. No one? No witnesses at all? Just this object found in another man's house, which he claims is mine. She's methodical, logical, not emotional, not weeping or begging, just dismantling the accusation, piece by piece. I'm also curious about the logic of this accusation, she says. If I possess such powerful magic, if I can bewitch a king, control his mind, force him to marriage against his will, why would I limit myself to such a small goal? The judges are listening now, really listening. Think about it, my lords. If I could control the king's mind, why stop at arranging a marriage? Why not control the entire kingdom? Why not bewitch Parliament? The nobility, everyone in power. It's brilliant. She's exposing the contradiction. The accusation only makes sense if you assume Jacquetta has just enough power to be dangerous, but not enough to be truly threatening. If I'm powerful enough to bend a king's will, I'm powerful enough to destroy anyone who opposes me. So why am I standing here, accused by Thomas Wake? Why haven't I bewitched him into silence? Why haven't I controlled his mind? Someone in the crowd laughs. Quickly, stifled, but the damage is done. The absurdity is exposed. The truth is simpler, Jacquetta says. My daughter is beautiful, intelligent. The king desired her. She refused to become his mistress. He married her. No magic required. Just a king making a choice. An impulsive choice, perhaps. A politically inconvenient choice, certainly. But a choice, his choice, not sorcery, not witchcraft. Just a man choosing a woman he wanted. She's done. She's said her piece. The rest is up to the judges. The court deliberates. Not long. The evidence is pathetic. One figurine, one accuser with obvious political motivations. No witnesses. No actual proof of anything. The verdict, not guilty. Jacquetta is cleared, completely, officially. The figurine is dismissed as meaningless. The accusations are dropped. She walks out of that courtroom free. The crowd parts for her. Nobles who are whispering about her witchcraft. An hour ago, now step aside. Respectful, maybe impressed. Jacquetta just survived a witchcraft trial using logic and rhetoric, in an era when women accused of witchcraft usually die screaming. She should feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she feels tired, because she knows this isn't over. The trial might be done, but the whisper campaign continues. Even with the acquittal, even with the court officially declaring her innocent, people will remember the accusation. They'll forget the acquittal. And that's exactly what Warwick wants. Plant the seed, let it grow, use it later when you need it. The accusation has done its damage, tainted the Woodville name, made people question whether there's something unnatural about their rise. And 14 years later, when Richard III needs to justify stealing the throne from Elizabeth's sons, he'll reach for this same weapon. Jacquetta bewitched Edward. The marriage was invalid. The children are bastards. Never mind that Jacquetta was cleared. Never mind that there was no evidence. The accusation is there, waiting, ready to be weaponized again. But for now, in 1469, Jacquetta has won. She's free. Her family is intact. And Warwick's rebellion is about to get much worse. Warwick doesn't give up. The failed witchcraft trial doesn't stop him. If anything, it makes him more desperate, because Edward is still king. The Woodvilles are still in power, and Warwick is running out of options. So he does something unthinkable, something that will shock everyone who knows England's recent history. He allies with the Lancastrians, the same people he spent years fighting, the same cause he helped destroy at Towton, the same faction he crushed to put Edward on the throne. Warwick goes to France, meets with Margaret of Anjou, Henry VI's queen, a woman who hates him, who blames him for her husband's deposition, who has every reason to want him dead, but hate is flexible when you want power back. They make a deal. Margaret's hatred of Warwick is smaller than her hatred of Edward, smaller than her desire to put her son on England's throne. Warwick will invade England, will overthrow Edward, will restore Henry VI to the throne, and Margaret will support him, will provide troops and money and legitimacy. It's a devil's bargain, an alliance built on mutual hatred and desperation. But it works. In 1470, Warwick invades, lands in England with an army, marches inland, and Edward's support evaporates. The nobles are tired of the Woodvilles, tired of being pushed aside, tired of this upstart family controlling everything. They don't rush to Edward's defence. Some even join Warwick. Edward is forced to flee. The King of England runs for his life, escapes to Burgundy with a handful of loyal followers. It's humiliating, devastating. The warrior king who won his throne at Towton is now scrambling for safety. And Elizabeth is in London when she gets word. Edward has fled. Warwick is coming. The Lancastrians are winning. She's 8 months pregnant, huge belly, swollen ankles, can barely walk without help, and she has to run. She takes her 3 daughters, Elizabeth of York, Cecily, Anne. The oldest is maybe 4 years old. The youngest is barely walking. They flee to Westminster Abbey, claim sanctuary. It's a medieval legal protection. If you reach a church, no one can legally drag you out without violating sacred law. Jacquetta goes with her. Of course she does. Her daughter needs her. Her grandchildren need protection. They arrive at the abbey in the middle of the night, pound on the doors until the abbot lets them in. The sanctuary is cold, stone walls that never fully warm, even in summer. Now, in October, it's freezing. They're given a small suite of rooms, not luxurious, not comfortable, just functional. Stone floors, narrow windows, a fireplace that smokes when the wind shifts. This is where they'll wait, in hiding, in fear, while Warwick controls London and puts Henry VI back on the throne. Imagine being Jacquetta in this moment. You're in your mid-60s, you've seen this before, been in sanctuary before during the wars, watched power shift, and thrones change hands. But this time is different. This time, your daughter is the deposed queen. Your grandchildren are in danger. Your entire family is at risk. If Warwick finds you, if he decides sanctuary doesn't matter, you could all be executed, attainted, erased. The days stretch into weeks. No word from Edward. No idea if he's alive or dead. No information from outside, except what the abbot cautiously shares. The food is basic. Bread and weak beer and occasional porridge. Nothing like the feast they're used to. The royal diet reduced to monastery rations. The girls cry, their children. They don't understand why they're hiding, why they can't go home, where their father is. Elizabeth tries to stay calm, tries to project confidence for her daughter's sake. But Jacquetta can see the fear, the uncertainty. They pray, a lot, because what else can they do? And then in November 2nd, 1470, Elizabeth goes into labour, in sanctuary, in a cold stone room, with minimal help. This is supposed to be a royal birth. There should be physicians, midwives, elaborate preparations, celebrations. Instead there's Jacquetta, her daughter's ladies-in-waiting, and a midwife the abbot finds somewhere. The labour is long, painful. Elizabeth screams. There's no privacy, the walls are thin. The abbey's monks can probably hear everything. But finally, after hours, the baby is born. A son, Edward, named after his father. The first male heir born to Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. Jacquetta holds her grandson, this tiny baby boy, born in hiding. Born in sanctuary while his father is in exile and his family is in danger. This child should be a prince, should be celebrated across England. Instead, he's born in secret, in fear. Is he the future king, or is he nothing? Does Edward still have a throne, or has everything collapsed? They don't know, can't know, just have to wait. Jacquetta looks at her daughter, exhausted from labour, pale, weak, holding her newborn son, and she sees herself 30 years ago, young, in love with Richard, willing to risk everything for a choice that made no political sense. That choice led to this, to Elizabeth, to this baby prince born in sanctuary. Was it worth it? All the scandal, the fine, the years of obscurity, looking at her daughter, at her grandson, at the family she's built. Yes, it was worth it. They just have to survive long enough to see it through. Edward returns in March of 1471. He lands at Ravenspur in Yorkshire with a small army, maybe 1,500 men, borrowed from his brother-in-law, Charles the Bold of Burgundy. It's not enough to win a war, not nearly enough. But Edward is a brilliant military commander, and he's angry. He marches south, gathers supporters as he goes, men who fought for York before, men who are tired of Warwick's scheming, men who want the Woodvilles gone but want Edward back. By the time he reaches London, his army has swelled, not huge but significant. Warwick scrambles to respond, raises his own forces, marches to meet Edward. They clash at Barnet, April 14th, 1471. Easter Sunday, dawn is just breaking, and there's fog. Thick, heavy fog rolling across the battlefield, the kind of fog where you can barely see 10 feet ahead, where sounds are muffled and direction becomes uncertain. The armies meet in the fog, start fighting, soldiers hacking at shapes in the mist, not sure if they're hitting enemies or friends. Warwick's forces include the Earl of Oxford. His troops wear badges with a star symbol, the son of York. Edward's forces wear badges with, coincidentally, a very similar sun symbol. In the fog, Oxford's men are mistaken for the enemy by their own side. Warwick's troops start attacking Oxford's forces. Friendly fire in the chaos. Oxford's men panic, think they're being betrayed. Break and run. The confusion spreads. Warwick's army starts to collapse. Warwick himself tries to escape, gets caught in the chaos, cut down by soldiers who may or may not know who he is. The Kingmaker dies in the fog at Barnet, face down in the mud, stripped of his armour and valuables. His body is taken to London, displayed at St. Paul's Cathedral to prove he's really dead. Because people need to see it, need confirmation that the man who made and unmade kings is finally gone. Edward is back, victorious, triumphant. He goes straight to Westminster Abbey, to sanctuary, to his wife and children. Jacquetta watches him reunite with Elizabeth, watches him meet his son for the first time. This baby boy born in hiding. Edward holds his heir, studies his face, and swears this will never happen again. His family will never be forced into sanctuary again. He doesn't keep that promise, but that's a story for later. For now, Edward is king again. The Lancastrian cause is crushed. Margaret of Anjou's army is destroyed at Tewkesbury a few weeks later. Her son is killed. Henry VI dies in the Tower shortly after, of melancholy, the official story says, which everyone understands means murder. The Yorkists have won, completely, definitively, and the Woodvilles emerge from sanctuary more powerful than ever. Elizabeth is queen again. Her son is heir to the throne. Her family is secure. But Jacquetta is tired. Months in sanctuary took their toll. The stress, the uncertainty, the fear. She's in her mid-60s, old by medieval standards, and she's been fighting for decades, fighting scandal when she married Richard, fighting poverty during their years of obscurity, fighting for her daughter's position, fighting witchcraft accusations, fighting for survival during Warwick's rebellion. She's exhausted. The next year passes quietly. Edward consolidates power. Elizabeth resumes her role as queen. The Woodvilles rebuild their influence, and Jacquetta watches, advises when asked, otherwise stays in the background. She's earned her rest. In 1472, she dies. The exact date isn't recorded, just sometime that year, quietly. No dramatic deathbed scene, no famous last words. Just an old woman dying peacefully, hopefully, surrounded by family. They bury her at Grafton Regis, the same place where Elizabeth married Edward in secret, where everything started. Her tomb is modest, nothing elaborate. The Woodvilles know better than to be ostentatious. Better to keep a low profile. Better not to remind people how far they've risen. Jacquetta's death should be the end of her story. It's not. Because 11 years later, when Richard III seizes the throne, he needs to justify it. Needs to explain why Edward's sons can't inherit. The answer? Their parents' marriage was invalid. Why was it invalid? Witchcraft. Jacquetta bewitched Edward. Used sorcery to force the marriage. She's been dead for 11 years. Can't defend herself. Can't stand in a courtroom and dismantle accusations. Dead women make perfect scapegoats. April 1483. Edward IV dies suddenly. He's only 40 years old. The official cause is probably pneumonia, maybe a stroke, possibly poison. There are always poison rumours when powerful people die unexpectedly, but most likely it's just the accumulation of years of hard living. Edward loved feasting, loved wine, loved women. His body finally gave out. He leaves behind 2 sons, Edward, Prince of Wales, 12 years old, and Richard, Duke of York, 9 years old. Edward V should become king. That's how succession works. The eldest son inherits. But there's a problem. Edward V is 12, too young to rule alone, which means a regency, a council of advisors who'll govern until he comes of age. And Elizabeth, his mother, Jacquetta's daughter, expects to play a major role in that regency. She's been involved in government for years. She knows the players. She understands policy. This is her moment. But Richard, Duke of Gloucester, Edward IV's brother, has other plans. Richard has been loyal to Edward for years, fought for him, governed the north effectively, never betrayed him. He expects to be protector, the main authority during Edward V's minority, and he's not going to share that power with the Woodvilles. Richard moves fast, intercepts young Edward on his way to London for the coronation, takes him into protective custody. He arrests Elizabeth's brother, Anthony Woodville, and her son, Richard Grey, charges them with treason, has them executed without trial. Elizabeth hears the news and does what Woodvilles do when threatened. She runs to sanctuary, again, back to Westminster Abbey, with her daughters and her younger son Richard. She's been here before, knows the drill, stone rooms, cold walls, waiting. But this time is different. This time, her eldest son, the king, is in Richard's custody. And Richard is making claims, disturbing claims. He says Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth was invalid, not legal, never legitimate. Why? Several reasons, all flimsy. But the one that sticks, the one that people remember, witchcraft. Jacquetta bewitched Edward, used sorcery to force the marriage. Elizabeth helped. Mother and daughter, both witches, using dark magic to steal a throne. It's the same accusation from 1469, reheated, weaponized, except Jacquetta has been dead for 11 years, can't defend herself, can't stand in court and expose the logical flaws. Richard uses the accusation to justify declaring Edward's children illegitimate, bastards, unable to inherit. Edward V, 12 years old, is stripped of his title, no longer king, just Edward of Westminster, a bastard with no claim to the throne. And Richard? Richard is crowned King Richard III in July 1483. The princes, Edward and his younger brother Richard, are moved to the Tower of London, officially for their safety, officially temporary. They're never seen again. What happened to them? We don't know for certain. The most likely theory, Richard had them murdered. 2 boys, 12 and 9, smothered in their beds, their bodies hidden somewhere in the tower, buried under stairs or dumped in the Thames. In 1674, workmen find 2 small skeletons under a staircase in the tower. They're assumed to be the princes. The bones are placed in an urn in Westminster Abbey, but no one can prove it. Not then, not now. Elizabeth, in sanctuary, helpless, doesn't know if her sons are alive or dead. No one will tell her. She's a prisoner, powerless. Everything Jacquetta fought for, everything Elizabeth achieved, the crown, the dynasty, the future, gone. Stolen by Richard, using the same weapon that failed against Jacquetta 14 years earlier. Witchcraft accusations. But here's the thing about the Woodville women. They don't give up. They don't surrender. They plan. And Elizabeth has one daughter left who can save the family line. Elizabeth of York, her eldest daughter, 17 years old, beautiful, Yorkist by blood. And there's a man in exile, a Lancastrian with a weak claim to the throne, Henry Tudor. If Henry invades England, if he defeats Richard, if he takes the throne, and if he marries Elizabeth of York, Jacquetta's granddaughter, then the Woodville blood flows through the royal line. The dynasty survives. Jacquetta's legacy endures. That's the plan. That's the gamble. And in 1485, it works. August 22nd, 1485. Bosworth Field, Richard III versus Henry Tudor, the final battle of the Wars of the Roses. Richard has the larger army, more experience, the advantage of being the crowned king, but he's lost support. Too many nobles quietly hate him, question his claim, resent how he took the throne. The battle is chaos, swords clashing, horses screaming, men slipping in mud and blood, and then Richard makes a choice. He sees Henry across the battlefield, sees his chance to end this in single combat. He charges, wearing his crown into battle, like something from legend. It's brave, it's stupid, it's very Richard III. He's surrounded, dragged from his horse, hacked down in the mud, his skull split open, his body stabbed repeatedly. Someone strips his armour, someone else strips his clothes. By the time they're done, the king is naked, bloodied. His corpse slung over a horse and taken to Leicester. His crown, the one he wore into battle, is found in a thorn bush, picked up, placed on Henry Tudor's head. Henry Tudor becomes King Henry VII, and he keeps his promise. He marries Elizabeth of York, Jacquetta's granddaughter. The wedding happens in January 1486. Westminster Abbey, full ceremony. Elizabeth of York, daughter of Elizabeth Woodville, granddaughter of Jacquetta of Luxembourg, becomes Queen of England. Red Rose and White Rose united. Lancaster and York joined. The Wars of the Roses ended, and Jacquetta's blood flows through the new royal line. Everything she fought for, everything she risked, everything she survived. It endures. Her grandson becomes King Henry VIII. Her great-granddaughter becomes Queen Elizabeth I. Every British monarch since 1485 carries Jacquetta's blood. She won. Not cleanly, not without terrible cost, but she won. The lead figurine didn't destroy her. The witchcraft accusations didn't erase her. The political enemies didn't eliminate her family. She survived, her daughters survived, her legacy survived, and the men who tried to destroy her, Thomas, Wake, disappeared from history, forgotten. Nobody. The Earl of Warwick, dead in the fog at Barnet, his body stripped and displayed. Richard III, dead at Bosworth, his crown in a thorn bush, his naked corpse buried in an unmarked grave, lost for 500 years until they found his skeleton under a parking lot. Every single man who accused Jacquetta of witchcraft died violently, died young, died with their reputations destroyed, while Jacquetta's blood flows through the Windsor line, through every British monarch for the next 500 years and counting. That's the real magic, not spells or sorcery, just the stubborn refusal to be destroyed. So what do we do with Jacquetta? How do we understand her 500 years later? She was accused of witchcraft, twice, cleared the first time, dead for the second. But the accusations worked. They damaged her reputation, made people question her family, provided ammunition for enemies. Even now, 500 years later, when people think of Jacquetta of Luxembourg, they think, wasn't she accused of witchcraft? Not, didn't she win that trial brilliantly? Not, didn't she teach her daughter how to become queen? Just something about witchcraft. The accusation sticks longer than the acquittal. That's the power of calling a woman a witch, even when it fails, even when she wins. The stain remains. But here's what actually matters. What the accusations tried to hide. Jacquetta was brilliant, strategic, a continental sophisticate who married for love and didn't care who disapproved. She taught her daughter everything: how to navigate power, how to survive in a world designed to destroy women who have ambitions. She walked into a courtroom at 60-something and destroyed every argument they made, used logic and rhetoric when she was supposed to beg and weep. She survived war, rebellion, exile, scandal, and witchcraft trials, and she died knowing her family was secure. Her daughter was queen. Her legacy would endure. Everything they tried to take from her, power, reputation, family, legacy, she protected, defended, preserved, not through magic, through intelligence, through strategy, through the absolute refusal to accept defeat. They called her a witch because they couldn't comprehend it, couldn't understand how a woman could outmaneuver men who'd been playing the power game for generations. It had to be supernatural, had to be unnatural, because natural women didn't do that. Natural women knew their place. But Jacquetta never learned that lesson. She married a knight when she was supposed to marry a duke. She advised her daughter when she was supposed to stay silent. She defended herself in court when she was supposed to beg for mercy. She survived when she was supposed to die. And 500 years later, we're still talking about her, still trying to understand her, still recognizing ourselves in her story, because the fight continues. The accusations keep coming, just wearing different words. Call a woman ambitious, aggressive, manipulative, too successful, too smart, too unwilling to apologize for wanting power. Different words, same function. Destroy the woman's credibility, make people question how she got where she is. But Jacquetta showed us how to fight back. Not with magic, with intelligence, with logic, with the refusal to disappear. Every time a woman stands up and demands proof instead of begging for mercy, she's following Jacquetta's path. Every time a woman refuses to be silenced, she's channeling Jacquetta. Every time a woman survives accusations designed to destroy her, she's proving Jacquetta was right. You don't need magic to win. You just need to be smarter than your enemies. More strategic, more determined, more stubborn. Jacquetta of Luxembourg, not a witch, just a woman who refused to lose. And in refusing to lose, she won everything. Thanks for staying with me tonight. If you made it this far, you're exactly who I make these for. Drop a comment, let me know what surprised you, what you didn't know, what you want to hear next, and hit subscribe. Because there are so many more stories like this, so many women accused, so many women who survived anyway. Sleep well. Dream of queens and witches and the women who refuse to be either. Dream of Jacquetta standing in that courtroom, destroying every argument with logic and wit. Dream of her holding her grandson, born in sanctuary, knowing he might be king someday. Dream of her legacy, flowing through centuries, through every British monarch since 1485. The woman they called a witch, the woman who won. Good night. And remember, being called dangerous just means you're doing something right.